Matsutake Forest Town is located on the edge of a vast forest surrounded by lush green trees with fresh air and picturesque scenery. The houses here are mostly in European style, with white walls that harmonize beautifully with the gardens, and every street is clean and tidy, as if time has slowed down. Most of the town's residents are middle class and lead peaceful and prosperous lives. The people in the town know each other well, and in the mornings you can always see neighbors greeting one another. Children laugh and play at school. Most people have their own businesses or small shops, and their lives seem perfect. On weekends, the local cafe is always packed, with everyone gathering to discuss daily matters or plan for the next town festival. Kevin, 50 years old, exudes a refined charm with his perfectly tailored suit, confident stride, and sharp gaze. He is one of the most successful real estate magnates in Pine Grove, owning multiple commercial properties and countless investments. His business acumen is impeccable, with nearly every decision yielding substantial returns. In social settings, he stands out, attracting numerous friends and business partners. People often describe him as rational and decisive. However, deep within Kevin's soul lies a well-hidden secret, one of painful memories from the past that he has never been able to let go. Though no one can perceive it, behind this seemingly glamorous man lies a constant struggle and silent torment. Allison, 48, is the most popular fashion store owner in Pine Grove. She runs a high-end boutique filled with uniquely designed clothing that attracts many fashion-conscious women. Allison's appearance is as captivating as her store, always immaculate with her makeup and tasteful outfits, making others think she has it all. Yet Allison's life is far from perfect as it appears. While striving for success in her career, she also tries to fill the emptiness within. Every night when she stands before the mirror, the woman she sees is not only a beautiful face and perfect body, but also one who is lonely and yearning to be understood. Her marriage, too, is far from the ideal it may seem. Kevin and Allison have been married for 15 years. On the surface, their marriage appears to be flawless, and they were once considered the model couple of Pine Grove. Kevin's success and Allison's elegance often made them the envy of others. However, as time passed, their relationship slowly began to change. Kevin became more and more busy, frequently traveling for work, and when he was home, he often seemed distracted. Allison, too, found herself questioning her life. The sweetness and harmony that once defined their relationship gradually faded, replaced by a silent indifference. Communication between them became increasingly rare, leaving only the unspoken distance and cracks in their bond. The love they once shared had long since faded, leaving only a facade to maintain. Allison's life had once been full of color and hope, but a sudden accident completely changed her and Kevin's world. It was one spring afternoon when Allison discovered she was pregnant. Although this news didn't stir up much excitement between her and Kevin, both of them realized that this would be a new beginning. Her pregnancy had been going smoothly, with only occasional discomfort, but she always managed to stay calm and optimistic, eagerly anticipating the birth of their child. However, fate did not follow their wishes. At 7 months pregnant, Allison suddenly showed signs of preterm labor. After an urgent hospital visit, the doctor informed her that the fetus was in critical condition and required immediate attention. While they anxiously waited, the baby was ultimately unable to survive. This unexpected blow left Allison deep in pain and loss, while Kevin, though trying to remain composed, was also devastated. He maintained his calm outwardly, but the emptiness and sorrow inside him were constantly gnawing at him. Losing their child became an insurmountable wound in their marriage. Kevin, increasingly consumed by his work, threw himself deeper into the expansion of his business, leaving him little time for reflection or to confront this heavy topic. Every time Allison tried to talk about the painful loss, Kevin would brush it aside with work or quickly leave. Over time, Allison began to feel that her emotions had no outlet, and Kevin's silence and avoidance made her feel even more isolated. The neighbors of Kevin and his wife are Professor George, his wife Natalie, and their son Benjamin. Professor George is a man in his early 50s, a respected literary scholar who once taught at a prestigious university in the city. However, over the years, he became weary of the noise and bustle of urban life and decided to move with his wife Natalie to the peaceful town of Pinewood in search of a more tranquil lifestyle. Natalie is a gentlewoman who had worked in an art gallery before retiring and now spends her time focusing on the family and gardening. She loves planting flowers and caring for plants, and her garden is beautifully tended like a picture. Their son, Benjamin, is a young man around 25, recently graduated from university. He studied philosophy at a university located far from Pinewood. Intelligent and rational, he also carries a certain solitary aura. After graduation, Benjamin decided to return home temporarily to rest and figure out his next steps. He came back to his parents' house with a sense of uncertainty about the future. The arrival of George, Natalie, and their son quickly attracted the attention of the neighbors. Unlike Kevin and his wife, who were more high-profile, the family kept a low-key presence. They frequently invited Kevin and Allison over for tea and conversation, though the topics were always centered around books, art, and travel. However, after every gathering, Allison couldn't help but feel increasingly drawn to this family. She would notice George's composed demeanor and the gentle aura that Natalie exuded, and she found herself stirred by emotions she couldn't quite explain. Since George's family moved into the house next door to Kevin and Allison, Benjamin and Allison began to interact more frequently, no longer limited to occasional greetings. At first, their connection was simply based on a shared interest, gardening. Allison enjoyed cultivating various flowers in her garden, and Benjamin had a deep passion for botany. He often came over to her garden to offer planting tips or help trim the plants. Over time, they began to find a subtle understanding in these daily interactions. As their contact increased, Allison began to notice that Benjamin's gaze was no longer as distant and indifferent as when they first met, but instead held a certain unspoken depth. Every time they were together, Benjamin would unconsciously move a little closer, his tone soft and somewhat suggestive. Allison instinctively felt a slight unease, yet she couldn't resist the curiosity and desire growing within her. She knew she was stepping into a very dangerous territory. Everything seemed to reach its tipping point one rainy day. That day, Kevin was away on a business trip, absent from home for the entire day. The sky was overcast, and a sudden downpour shattered the peace of the small town. Allison was alone in her house, tidying up some garden matters when she received a phone call from Benjamin. His voice sounded a little tense on the other end of the line. "The rain is pouring outside. Can I come over to your place to take shelter for a while?" Allison's heart skipped a beat. Although she knew this was not a simple request, she didn't refuse and simply gave a soft agreement. She opened the door, and Benjamin, soaked through, stepped inside with a nervous but gentle smile. Allison immediately handed him a towel, and he took off his wet coat, revealing his well-built chest and calm demeanor. The air between them suddenly grew heavy, almost burning. After Benjamin changed into dry clothes, they sat by the fireplace, listening to the storm outside the window. The room smelled of dampness and wood, and it was eerily quiet, making their hearts race. Allison found her heartbeat quickening uncontrollably as she began to focus more on every subtle movement of Benjamin, and Benjamin seemed to be hypersensitive to every glance she made. The rain gradually lightened, and the night grew even deeper. In that moment, Benjamin suddenly reached out and gently grabbed Allison's wrist. She froze, feeling her heartbeat pounding in her ears. A warning flashed through her mind, reminding her that this was a path of no return, but her body had already betrayed her reason. She didn't pull her hand back, instead lowering her head and closing her eyes. At that instant, Benjamin leaned in closer, his warm breath lingering by her ear. Allison felt his kiss as an electric shock against her skin, and then his lips met hers, gentle yet urgent. That kiss seemed to break all the barriers, and she could no longer stop the impulsive act that was about to change everything. Though both of them knew that what they were doing was not only immoral, but would also lead them into a dangerous abyss, at that moment, neither could stop. The air in the room grew even hotter as Allison's inner conflict and fear melted away in Benjamin's embrace, leaving only an uncontrollable desire. As their relationship quietly unfolded that night, despite the rain still echoing outside the window, both of them were already immersed in a complex emotional whirlwind. Allison understood that everything they had done would change her future with Kevin, but she could not stop relying on Benjamin, nor could she resist the emotional turmoil inside her. That day, Kevin originally planned to finish some important work before heading home, but due to a sudden business meeting ending earlier than expected, he decided to leave the office ahead of schedule and go back to their home in Pinewood Town. Kevin didn't inform Allison in advance, and he had no premonition of anything unusual. He was used to Allison's usual routine and assumed she was either in the garden or spending time in the living room. As he entered the door, he heard faint sounds coming from inside the house, seemingly from the living room. Soft voices and occasional light laughter. A sense of unease unconsciously crept into Kevin's mind. Though busy with work, he still paid enough attention to matters at home, particularly his wife's interactions with their neighbor. Lately, he had felt something was off. Although Allison's interactions with Benjamin appeared innocent, Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more beneath the surface. He gently put down his briefcase and took off his jacket, moving silently toward the living room. As he got closer, he could hear the conversation more clearly. The voices of Benjamin and Allison intertwined, not particularly loud but filled with an intimate atmosphere. There was no obvious conflict, yet the closeness between them felt suspicious. Kevin's heart began to race, and he instinctively slowed his pace as he approached the living room door. He pushed the living room door open with a sudden motion, and the scene before him nearly made him lose control. Allison was sitting on the couch, and Benjamin was sitting next to her, unnervingly close. Allison had slightly tilted her head, and Benjamin's hand was resting on her shoulder, their eyes sharing a complex look. What shocked Kevin even more was that Allison didn't push Benjamin away as she would have in the past. Instead, she seemed to relax, allowing him to sit so close. In that moment, Kevin's heart felt as if it had been violently squeezed, overwhelmed by anger and betrayal. He froze for a few seconds, then rushed into the living room, his voice full of suppressed fury. "What are you two doing?" His words were like a sharp knife cutting through the stillness of the room. Allison and Benjamin were stunned by the sudden confrontation. Allison stood up quickly, her face instantly pale. There was panic and guilt in her eyes, and her lips trembled, unable to form any words. Benjamin, too, seemed taken aback for a moment, then stood up, his hand slightly raised, as if he wanted to explain but found no right words. Kevin's anger reached its peak, and his voice almost shouted, "What's going on behind my back, Allison? How could you have this kind of relationship with him? Do you know what this means for us?" Allison's face grew even paler, and she tried to speak but was suffocated by guilt and fear. She lowered her head, unable to look Kevin in the eye. She had thought that their secret would remain hidden forever, but in that instant, all the lies and uncertainty crumbled under the weight of Kevin's furious gaze. Benjamin glanced at Kevin, his voice steady, yet full of helplessness. "Kevin, I never meant for things to come to this. Kevin interrupted him abruptly, his anger consuming everything. "How did this happen between you two? When did it start? Do you think I could just sit here and not notice?" Benjamin said nothing, his head bowed. He knew that there was no defense for his actions anymore. Allison couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She knew this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it to arrive so suddenly. She looked at Kevin's enraged face, and an indescribable pain flooded her heart. Kevin's fury continued to rise, and he could no longer stand the sight before him. He had done so much for Allison, promised her a lifetime of companionship and support, but now everything seemed to have crumbled. The room was thick with tension, anger, pain, and shame swirling together, suffocating everyone in the room. At that moment, Kevin fully realized that the crack in their marriage was no longer just surface coldness, but a deep wound of betrayal and disappointment. "Did you really think I didn't know?" Kevin growled through gritted teeth, his heavy steps closing in on Benjamin. "You think you can just disappear in front of me? You dare betray me? You dare steal my wife?" Benjamin felt Kevin's anger intensifying with every step, his heart pounding faster. He clenched his fists, instinctively feeling the rising threat. He knew that the man before him, once composed and brilliant, had now lost all control. "Kevin, calm down," Benjamin said in a low, anxious voice. "This isn't what you think." He stepped back, trying to keep Kevin from getting too close, but Kevin couldn't hear any explanation. His anger had completely overtaken him. He stormed towards Benjamin, his rage unchecked. He raised his hand and pushed Benjamin forcefully in the chest, shouting, "You don't deserve to be here!" Benjamin stumbled backward, knocking into the bedside table. As Kevin moved closer, Benjamin's heartbeat quickened, and beads of sweat appeared on his skin. In that moment, instinct took over. Without thinking, his hand grabbed the heavy bedside lamp, the only weapon in reach. He didn't have time to think. In a panic, Benjamin swung the lamp's priam high and struck Kevin in the head with all his might. The sound of the impact shook the room, and Kevin let out a muffled grunt before collapsing to the floor, blood pouring from the gash on his forehead. Allison screamed and rushed to Kevin's side, kneeling beside him. But when she saw his lifeless eyes and his pulse stop, her heart shattered. Kevin's death had come so suddenly, and the house was filled with an eerie silence. "We can't call the police," Benjamin's voice was urgent as it whispered in Allison's ear. "We can't let anyone find out. If we do, it's over for both of us." Allison didn't respond. She just stared blankly at Kevin's body, filled with conflicting emotions of sorrow and guilt, but also understanding. They had no choice but to hide the truth. So Allison and Benjamin quickly made a decision. Allison grabbed plastic bags and tape from the kitchen, carefully wrapping Kevin's body. They dragged him to the backyard, dug a temporary hole, and buried him. As the earth covered his body, neither spoke a word. Only the sound of the shovel scraping against the dirt broke the oppressive silence of the night. Once they finished cleaning the scene, they returned to the house and wiped away any trace that could expose what had happened to Kevin. Allison wiped the tears from her face, forcing herself to stay calm. She knew that their only option now was to fabricate a perfect lie. "Kevin is missing," Allison muttered to herself. "We'll say he's gone missing so everything can go smoothly." Benjamin nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "We have to be careful. No one can suspect anything." Everything seemed to calm down, but the pain and fear continued to spread between them. Kevin's death was irreversible, and the secret they were hiding together would become an inescapable shackle. The news of Kevin's disappearance quickly attracted the attention of the police. When Allison reported to the authorities, she seemed both confused and anxious, claiming that Kevin had been missing for several days and might have gone on a business trip. She patiently explained, her eyes filled with helplessness and bewilderment, as if she truly didn't know where her husband had gone. However, the police's intuition told them that the situation was not as simple as Allison described. The investigation quickly began, and through checking Kevin's garage, phone records, and emails, the police uncovered some subtle anomalies. Initially, Allison maintained that the last message Kevin sent indicated he had gone on a business trip, but the police found that the last phone signal from Kevin didn't match the time or location she described. This raised further suspicion. More perplexing was the discovery of illogical evidence in Kevin's home. A section of the floor had been wiped clean of blood, which didn't look like the result of a typical household accident. More importantly, the police learned that Benjamin's car had been near Kevin's house just before Kevin went missing, which made the case even more confusing. As the investigation deepened, the police learned from neighbors that Benjamin and Allison had been in frequent contact in the days leading up to Kevin's disappearance. Some witnesses even reported seeing them talking intimately in the backyard. Although this information couldn't directly prove anything, it added to the suspicion surrounding their relationship. Meanwhile, the coroner's report showed that Kevin's cause of death was not an accident, but was due to a blow to the head, which contradicted Allison's initial explanation. The police continued their investigation using technical methods to analyze Kevin's social media and phone records, which, along with forensic evidence and neighbors' testimonies, gradually revealed the hidden relationship between Allison and Benjamin. Ultimately, the evidence pointed to the truth, that Kevin's death was not an accident, but the result of a violent altercation, and the masterminds behind it were his wife Allison and her young lover, Benjamin. As the truth came to light, Allison and Benjamin were arrested by the police and charged with murder. During interrogation, they finally admitted to their crimes, expressing deep regret for Kevin's death. However, despite their remorse, their actions were irreversible, and they would have to face the legal consequences and pay the price for their wrongdoing. The verdict for Allison and Benjamin hit the small town like a bomb, causing deep cracks in the community. People no longer easily believed in the smiles of every couple, nor did they think that the friendships among neighbors were so pure. After the case was revealed, the residents of the town became more cautious with one another, and some who had once been close friends began to distance themselves. The once warm and trusting town had become quieter and more guarded. However, it was through all these events that people began to realize that the peacefulness and tranquility on the surface were often fragile illusions. Everyone began to listen more closely to their own inner voices and re-examine their relationships with others. Although Pinewood Town was forever changed by the tragedy, perhaps it also helped people understand more clearly that real life is not just a beautiful exterior, but one built on sincerity and courage from within.